Hello and welcome to In the Red with Curtis White. I'm Tony. I'm on intro duty today as Curtis uses these final days before the Cyclocross World Championships to prepare to compete in Fayetteville, Arkansas with Team USA. We got a great show for you though. Our friend Michael Vandenham joins the show. Michael's been training with Curtis in Albuquerque the last couple of weeks, and we had an awesome time talking about Hoogerheide, talking about their training, talking about the World Championships, and a few other topics that came up throughout the conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. Before we jump into that, though, I got a couple just quick notes. First, this episode is sponsored by Whoop. Whoop is a digital training device that helps measure sleep, recovery, and stress. Whether you're an elite athlete like Curtis or an everyday working person like me or anything in between, Whoop can help you bring your best every single day. So check out the link in the show notes and use the code INTHERED to get in the green. I also want to tell you about the Keuka Lake Gravel Classic. I'm really excited for this event. It's hosted by my friends Blaine and Chad from the Steuben Brewing Company. These guys are cyclists and they lived in the Finger Lakes for most of their lives. And they're inviting us to come ride from the brewery and experience all that the Finger Lakes have to offer. They got great food, beer, wine, amazing courses right along the lake and through some really gnarly gravel terrain. So check out the event at the link in the show notes. Register soon and use the code INTHERED before the World Championships and save 10% on your entry fee. We hope to see you there. All right. So that's all I got. Enjoy In the Red with Curtis White and our favorite Canadian, Michael Vandenham.
On the start line, Curtis White here from you.
Razendsnel in dat trappen.
And ready to go here in Brazener, and we are on the way. Van der Poel alongside Curtis White. Tonart right alongside him, and it's the American that gets a hold shot.
Dat was ronde 1 en op de laatste.
The coffee tasted good this morning. He's got a new podcast, In the Red. To see him with such a great start today, I know a lot of American fans are going to be really pumped by this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of In the Red with Curtis White. We've been down in Albuquerque, New Mexico, preparing for the Cyclocross World Championships. They're coming up. It's just only a week away at this point. We're recording this on Sunday. We're 7 days away from the World Championships, and it's a big race because it's, World Championships are coming to the U.S. So it's a lot of preparations gone into this, a lot of focus, a lot of effort, but it's been a good training camp, and I am joined by a competitor, but also a friend of mine, Mike Vandenham, who's also not American. He's Canadian. We were joking around last week on the podcast about this training camp's a bit of a diplomatic mission to kind of show that Canadians and Americans can prepare for a common goal together. But Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast. And it's already this camp has really flown by.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Curtis, Tony. I'm trying to rub off some of my Canadianisms on Curtis, and I think it's working. Already this morning, he was trying to write an email, and it came up spelling things the Canadian way, so it's been successful.
Yeah, I tried to write, spell the word favor, and then I wanted to add a U in there.
Mission accomplished. Spreading U's to the south of the border.
But Tony, how's everything in New York?
Good, man. We're getting snow again, just like we were last week when we recorded. So we had a nice Sunday morning of watching some World Cup racing with the family, doing a little podcasting, and then we're going to go out and hit some skiing. So it's a good weekend.
Yeah, that's good stuff because I've been talking to my family, my friends back home, and it seems like the weather is pretty, it's just cold. You're getting snow. There's some ice coming in, and there are a few days it was even single digits. And at this point of the year, you really want to make sure you're in an environment as an athlete to really control your environment and to get consistent training in. And where we are, the reason why we chose Albuquerque was because it's not the best weather. It's about 50, 55 degrees every day, but it's sunny and it's consistent. So the weather's good enough to where you're able to get out consistently, but not too good to where you're going to want to go out for these big, long adventure rides and kind of go someplace new. And everything's very regulated and measured here. So that's been a pretty big benefit of coming to a place like Albuquerque. And it's been great to have a training partner through this. And that's kind of the direction of this conversation. I think it's just kind of going over, we haven't raced in a few weeks, but kind of highlighting what a training camp is like for two athletes kind of preparing for a world championships. And especially where, you know, a lot of our European competitors are able to race, but you can go back. A lot of our competitors were at training camp either last week. Some people missed the Flamanville World Cup, or after their national championships, they were off for training camp. So this is a time where everyone's cracking down and really making sure that they're controlling their environment and getting in solid work just to sharpen the sword.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what you guys have been up to. I'm excited to talk with Michael. I wanted to ask you, I want to talk about the racing too today, but I hear you're everybody's second favorite Canadian, but I just want you to know that right here, they don't speak for me. You're my favorite Canadian, man. In the red.
I made the list.
You're number one.
Tony's a free thinker.
That's right.
I don't know who put you in that box, but I'm taking you out.
Don't subscribe to the CX Hairs narrative. I'm the first favorite Canadian.
Right. You heard it here, man. Curtis is my second favorite American, though, just for the record.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Who's the first favorite American?
It's Jeremy Powers. Don't be ridiculous.
No, soon to be world champion Claire
Emma White. Oh, yeah.
Well, you used to be number 3. You got promoted.
So I'm climbing the list.
Yeah.
So I have forward momentum.
Emma doesn't race cross anymore, so you moved
right.
up. Yeah.
If she comes back to cross, punt it right back down the list.
Back down. Yeah.
Actually,
it's a good number 1 and 2 to be behind, though.
It is. There's no shame in that.
No shame. Anyway, you want to start with talking about the racing from this morning a little bit, or you want to jump into training first?
Since it's fresh in our memories, let's talk about Hoogerheide.
It was pretty exciting.
That was a really, really exciting race. We caught the end of the women's race with Voss taking it. That was really exciting to see. But the men's race, though, I thought was one of the most exciting and impressive races, because about halfway through, you thought Pidcock was going to ride away with it. And actually, Tony, you and I were texting before. My money was on Quinton on this course. Yours was on Lars. Mm-hmm. And for the first couple laps, it looked like, man, we both had really good choices. And then the race just changed in an instant. And then it looked like Pidcock was riding away with it. And then the last 2 laps, I thought, were some of the most impressive cyclocross racing I've seen in a while.
Yeah, with that crash. Was that forced by Pidcock just taking that so fast and guys trying to stay on him? I mean, I know he didn't make anybody crash, but just forcing the pace that created that gap, or what do you think caused it?
It was interesting to see how many crashes there were over the barriers. Usually you might see 1 per race, but there were 2 really significant ones, Van Turnhout and Toon Aerts earlier in the race. And for both those guys, I thought after the race, Ellie sort of staked his claim on being the Belgian leader in a race that was really heavily influenced by Quinton dropping his chain, by Tone crashing in the barriers and taking out his kidney, and by Van Turnhout crashing in the barriers. So it's interesting that Ellie, I mean, he doesn't know what happened behind him, but I think Ellie's staking his claim, and probably all 3 of those guys are going to be going, no, but I was there.
At least saw Tone's crash, and then he was caught behind Quinton's crash because Lars hit the deck. Lars was able to get up very quickly. Ely was caught behind that. But Quinton did drop his chain and had to he was back in the 3rd group for a while, trying to make up ground. But it was that course is always, when it's very fast, it's a high consequence course, just because you're pushing these sections to the absolute maximum. And you could see that again. It's the typical race where it's perhaps there's some muddy sections, some greasy corners, but all of the European riders are riding Grifo tires. So you have that mid-range tire. It's greasy, it's slick. You may not have the right traction through all of these sections, but they're masters at letting the bike slide. And you have that less rolling resistance on the longer straightaways, especially in that long pavement section where you're really trying to maximize your speed. And just with a heavier tire, you're wasting effort, you're wasting watts. So they want to be able to push that limit as much as they can on those straightaways and not waste energy. But the downside of that, the risk is that you're just pushing the fold and you slide down on a couple of these corners. And that's, I think, what you saw with the Lars crash or a couple of these other mistakes, these dabs that people were making.
I feel like I left this race wondering too, would Lars have won had he hopped the barriers? And to me, it's yeah.
I agree.
Was off the gas a little bit there, and he clearly has the best, 10, 15 second punch out of any of those guys. You could just see that as he was closing up to start finish. He got pretty close to Iserbyt, and he hops those barriers, and I think he's able to do that punch up that pavement climb, and the race is his. So, I mean, he hops sometimes, and these barriers were definitely high consequence, but you have to wonder in that situation, is he going back and, kicking himself for not doing it, not taking that risk?
Maybe. If there's a rider that probably isn't the most comfortable hopping at that level, it is Lars. I think we've seen a lot of those riders that made a serious concerted effort to improve that skill. And I think for Lars can hop, but it's just, again, at that speed, because the World Cups always have the 40 centimeter barriers. And it seemed like they were pretty far apart, like almost 6 meters. But that's why you have the highest level guys are just going at these barriers so fast and able to just clear them. And then you come out of the barriers with 2-3 bike lengths on anyone who's running, even if you're a spectacular runner. But it definitely was one of those skill sets where Eli and Tom had the advantage on the last lap. They both hopped him cleanly, and Lars was the only one to run. And that was 2-3 bike lengths. But the sprint, the last 200-300 meters, there's a slingshot effect, because when you come back onto the pavement off that sketchy off camber, you go downhill for about 50 meters, and then it slingshots you back up the hill. So it's not to your advantage to lead that sprint out. Even if you're 3 bike lengths back, you can get in the draft and really slingshot up that. And there was when I did that, the Hoogerheide World Cup at my last year under 23, it was the year of the Beals World Championships in Luxembourg. I was fighting for 6th place. It was my last year as an under 23. And I got very ambitious in the last lap. I was fighting for position. I won the first wheel coming off of the final run up. I won the battle to the off camber, and I was first onto the pavement. I was fighting for 6, and it was in a group of 5. And all of a sudden, the final 100 meters, all the riders behind me had that draft effect and were able to slingshot past me. And I went from 6th to 10th in seemingly like the blink of an eye. And that was a bigger group. It was a smaller group coming into this finish. And I think Lars just was able to time that a bit better. And I think with this finish, everyone just has that experience to know, like Pidcock he was just trying to hold that wheel as much as he could. And maybe he was being too ambitious, thinking he was still in the win for that, but maybe it would have been more advantageous to kind of sit up, regroup, and then play the sprint for second a little bit better. But I mean, knowing him, it's either he's racing for the win or it's nothing.
Iserbyt definitely played a card too. Like, he took a little bit of a risk by attacking up. The way he attacked, it was all or nothing. He was going to get the gap before that top section where you drop off the off camber and go up the stairs, or he was probably going to be in trouble. Like, had Pidcock been able to hold his wheel there, it might have been a different race.
Mm-hmm. So
he played his card and it worked out, but it was definitely a calculated risk, looking at, probably thinking that he wasn't going to be able to beat someone like Lars in a straight out sprint.
Yeah, I agree. It was exciting. That the final 2 laps are really, really cool. So yeah,
got me amped up for next week. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to go watch a World Championships where we have no idea who's going to win. The last few years, I love watching Matthew and Wout, and I love watching them battle it out. But the last few years, it's been, one or the other, and it's going to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
This time, I think it's going in with 4, 5, maybe more riders who have the opportunity to win, and there's team dynamics that we haven't seen in a while. There's a chance for, a British world champion, which would, I don't remember, that's happened before, but it's been a while.
Yeah, and I think it's the World Championships are always unique because we're watching some of the old Flandrian Classics videos of the where the cannonball from Ball came from. I think we shared this video on the podcast a few podcasts ago, but there are some really great Flemish videos kind of highlighting the stars of cyclocross, and kind of the age-old controversy is you race for your trade team all season long. That's where you make your salary, your living. And then you go to the World Championships and all of a sudden you have to represent your country. And Sven Nys was in this predicament where at a World Championships, he was racing for his team alliance for Rabobank at the time. And Richard Groenendaal, who was Dutch, racing for the Dutch national team, won the world championships, and his Belgian teammate Mario de Klerk was furious because Sven wasn't racing for Belgium. He was racing for his trade team, and Belgium lost the chance to win a world championship. So that was a massive controversy. And now I think in the press or in Ely's interview, you're going to see there are a number of Belgian racers that think that they deserve to win. Quinten's on very good form. He won when the World Cup was in Fayetteville last. Tone is going really well. Ely's going well. Michael Van Tornout's going well. So you have a number of high-level Belgian athletes, just Belgians alone, that think that they can win. And Ely was in the press saying they need to kind of unite and race this more as a Belgian team and race for one or two Belgians tops instead of all the Belgians thinking that they can win. Because that's what happened at the European Championships, where you had a number of Belgians that were on the front attacking. Lars raced his own race, came by and had a very impressive victory at the European Championships, and all the Belgians lost out. So I think Ely, he had the cleanest race. He raced the smartest race in Hoogerheide, but I think that was kind of his stamp of authority saying, I deserve to be the leader at the World Championships. And I'm very curious to see what the dynamic is going to be.
Right. You just know Tone's probably there going, well, if I hadn't crashed on the barriers, I almost came back on the last lap. And that Quinten's there going, oh, if I hadn't dropped my chain, I would have been there too.
Right. And Michael Van Tornout was also in the front group. So there's easily four guys right there that are able to potentially win.
So does that tension give Lars and Pidcock an advantage?
It could
potentially. I mean, it gave Lars the advantage at the European Championships.
Yeah. Yeah, and Pidcock, it wasn't in that race. So now you got two to contend with there.
Exactly. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic. But yeah, it's already in the interviews and in the press, there is some heat being thrown around, which is exciting. It's exciting to see that in sport.
And the pressure's on for the Belgian men as well. Like, they haven't won a world championship since Wout won in, would have been Valkenburg. It's been a little while.
Yeah, Valkenburg.
So that's a pretty big drought for, the cyclocross center of the world.
Yeah, it's going to be bad if they go home empty-handed, right?
I think it's the team tactics are going to be a little bit less at the forefront of things in the women's race, though, in the elite women's race. Because the Dutch squad is so formidable, and depending on the conditions, we could see things really shaken up. I'd love to see Clara up there. Magalie's going very strong, but again, I think everyone's just talking about the Dutch women, and they have been talking about the Dutch women for a long time, and kind of the resources that they've been putting into that development pipeline and into those athletes to continually work on those skills training sessions and getting those athletes together and consistently training at a high level. All that effort's paying off, and you can very clearly see that. You'll see it in the under 23 women's race as well as the elite women's race. So it's all around. I think there's a lot of really, really exciting racing to look forward to this weekend. Yeah,
no doubt. Both races are going to be really exciting. So let's talk about what you guys have been doing to prepare here. You guys have been there for a couple of weeks now. So you're kind of finishing up at Albuquerque. What's that look like for you now, or leading up to this point, and what's the plan over the course of the next few days?
Yeah, so we sort of finished up our last hard workout yesterday. Did 3.5 hours with some good sprints and accelerations, and from now it's a couple days of rest, tapering in, and then starting that now gives the opportunity to get some hard work on course and maybe another ride before Fayetteville. But we're going to go our separate ways tomorrow, and both make our way to Worlds. But it's been really great just to have a training partner for these past 10 days, 2 weeks. It's, one of the things that we miss in North American cross is we don't have the big teams like they do in Europe. So you don't get the opportunity to train with your peers and people that are able to push you. So being able to just be here with Curtis, and I think we've been able to push each other and keep each other on it. And it even helps dial in some of those little things, the daily routines, making sure you get out the door, to go on your training ride at a consistent time every day, making sure that you're both, without saying it as much, you're both keeping each other on it about, eating well, eating clean, doing the right things, doing rolling out and body work and all that stuff, doing really high quality workouts. It's just a net benefit.
Mike, I completely agree. And I think so. You and I are both coached by the same coach from Cyclosmart, Al Donahue. And one of the benefits of kind of having the same coach through these training blocks is that we're on the exact same training program. We're doing the same workouts every day. So yeah, we do have someone to kind of have these mini competitions with every single day. Like we're doing, these, technical training sessions, trying to hold the wheel, or interval training or sprints or whatever we're doing. You have another wheel to really, again, keep yourself honest, but also just kind of hold yourself accountable to the workout, the effort. You're not overextending, you're focusing on the recovery. And it just kind of that idea of living for a sport. Everything we're doing 24/7 here is with the goal of a world championships, to bring our best to this race. And it's only one day of the year, but that whole process is so unique and special in that everything that we do, from waking up to pouring the coffee, the making the breakfast, preparing for the training, making sure the body's aligned, that we recovered well from the day before, the entire training session, the recovery process from that, taking a nap, making dinners, or everything that we do during the day, it's at a high level. And again, we're able to hold each other accountable to that. So that's one of the unique things about a training camp with a training partner. I've found that this is more beneficial than going it alone sometimes, because you're able to control your environment a little bit more, but you don't have that other wheel or that other person, that other teammate for this time period to really hold you accountable.
And it has worked out really well. Like, I think we've worked well together. Sometimes in these situations, you can see the competitiveness sneaks in too much during the week of training, but we just haven't really had that. We've stayed the course as far as our training goes. We've had some competitiveness when we need it on the sprints, on some of those snappy little workouts, but sometimes the risk with doing training camps is like you're out on the endurance ride and the pace just notches up.
Right. Yeah. And you're just looking at half wheel the person. But I think we both have that maturity and experience within the sport where we have competed at a high level. And we both, at this point at the World Championships, it's like we both want to focus on our own process and for the both of us to have our own success.
Yeah.
My success isn't contingent upon beating you or vice versa. We're both looking to have solid rides for ourselves and be proud of our process and proud of our effort as individuals. So it's beneficial for the both of us to come together for this period.
For sure. I think we race worlds. If you have a good race, you're going to know it. If I have a good race, I'm going to know it. And it's not contingent on whether I beat you or you beat me. It's just like, if you have a good race. It doesn't.
Yeah. It would be a bit, the dynamic is different. Like, say if, we're going into a Pan American Championships, I don't think you and I would be at a training camp together, because
probably not.
My success is contingent upon beating you. And now you start to take it personally. Side note, we've been watching a lot of Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. And now it's kind of this running joke through the entire training camp. Oh, I took that personally. I took offense to this. It got under my skin. And so it's that little added motivation, but it's just, that was a cool documentary just to kind of, it's another sport. It's another athlete you're watching, another process, but just you get these little takeaways from it, and that's always cool.
So with that experience in mind, then, if you could kind of sculpt your perfect training in the future off of this, would it be with more guys and more of a larger elite team? Like we talked about like 3 ideas you're probably going to hate bit there before. One of them I always thought was having this elite North American squad that comes in, probably cleans up all the domestic races, and then spends a lot more time in Europe to bring guys to the next level. Is that type of thing beneficial, or is it just these little isolated blocks right now and you prefer to keep it that way?
I'm going to kind of counter that with an idea that I'm going to love and maybe everyone else will hate, but I think that Beverly, Massachusetts is the epicenter of North American cyclocross. And I think every top athlete should consider moving to the North Shore, Massachusetts area.
Well, no, but that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like you take all these guys, you get 5 or 6 of the top guys, and everybody goes wherever it is to one spot for the season. And we're like, we're committed and we're going to race, and we're going to race through an early season World Cup schedule here in the US. And then we're going to go to Europe, and that's how we're going to elevate ourselves to that more international level. And, just like like they do in Europe, basically.
It would absolutely elevate everyone's game. Does it work when you're competing for race wins for the first half of the season domestically? That's the question. Like, definitely it would make everybody better relative to the world when they head over in a racing World Cup. So
I think it would help in the early season because it also that allows for us to push each other harder. And there's this interesting dynamic in North American cyclocross where we don't often see our competitors. We only see them at the races. We never see them in training. We never have that camaraderie outside the races, or very rarely have that camaraderie outside the races. And that's kind of difficult to find. But if you look at a number of the top European athletes that are training with each other on a routine basis, if things get aggressive in the race over the weekend and someone cuts each other off, or someone causes a crash, you're angry in the moment and you may take it personally, but a couple of days later you're training together and you move on. And you're able to kind of grow that sense of camaraderie and kind of just continue to push each other further and not take these little things, these perceived aggressions in the race as personally.
When it's so ridiculous in my mind when someone is upset after a race that someone chopped them. And it's like, well, of course they did. It's a bike race. Like, what do you expect should happen? Especially when it comes down to the last couple laps. Like, I hope I'm going to try to chop somebody and I hope they try to chop me.
Well, you've already done that a couple of times to me. Should we bring up Pan American Championship?
Oh, yeah.
Old beef.
I don't know if there's ever even beef there.
No, there wasn't. That was pretty. I think that was kind of blown up in the media over the months after that. But but that's also racing, right? Mm-hmm. When you have athletes that are competing at the highest level for a win, kind of that just sport at that level, like everyone kind of throws away kind of, that sense of camaraderie, that friendship, and you're just like, you're just going head to head with someone that you want to beat. And I think that's, that's something that's very special that, the US, I think a lot of that, especially on the men's side, we have a bit more to grow in that area. But it's just, I think it's, if we just continue to kind of come together over these, for training camps, whether it be during the summer or come together leading into the World Championships, the US national team stays together in Sittard in the Netherlands at the same complex, having those training sessions together, it helps. Over December, I was training with Gage Hecht, Scott Funston, like those are really solid training sessions, and you're able to rub a couple of elbows and really push each other to the limit and then laugh it off if someone slips or bumps you too hard off the line. And it is what it is. But there is that fine line of kind of, you want to show your competitors respect, but it's, not taking full advantage or being overly aggressive, but also kind of holding your own. And, you want to win. And, when there's two athletes that feel as though that they can win, I think there's that full respect between them.
And it's not a crazy concept. Like you said, we were watching The Last Dance, and numerous times throughout that, there's sort of like a big coming together of the stars of all the different teams. And most notably when they were filming Space Jam, right? Mm-hmm. It was like there was a pickup game every night with the who's who of basketball. And MJ, of course, was using this to scout people, but it was also just really good basketball that was elevating everybody's game.
I love that there was a scene between Reggie Miller and Michael Jordan where there were a couple scenes before in the series where they were playing pickup games together or laughing at each other, kind of this like playful trash talking. And then in one of the playoff games, it's full competition. Like you're coming into these games just with the knife between the teeth, and that Reggie pulled a move on Jordan that was just like, it was so cool to kind of see it in slow motion. But I don't think either one of them took a move like that personally. And it's sport at the highest level.
Yeah, I think if you're truly a competitor, you want everybody else to compete just as hard as you do, trying to beat you.
Yeah. But anyway, this is kind of the long meandering response to your question, Tony. I feel like we're always rambling on this podcast.
That's what podcasts are all about. What else would we do if we weren't rambling?
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't we talk a little bit about coaching though? Because I know Michael is a coach. Curtis, you always kind of dabbling in that mindset, and I can definitely see you going in that direction at some point more intensely than you already are a little bit. But I was curious. Curtis and I kind of talked a little about this last week, Michael. But like, how do you balance coaching other athletes and performing at such a high level? Obviously, you have to be selfish to compete at the level you compete at and take care of yourself. But as a coach, you're taking care of other people too. So to me, that seems like a really difficult task to do it simultaneously.
I think it definitely is a little bit challenging sometimes when you're in heavy training blocks to do that. But honestly, I feel like having something else to focus on throughout the day when I'm training is really beneficial. I've been just an athlete before, and there's definitely value to that, but I like being able to do my training, do the work I need to do, and then put it aside and focus on something else. And it also helps, instead of just finding, as an athlete, one of the pitfalls is you're always evaluating yourself, always finding your value in what you did most recently. So I've just really enjoyed being able to, like I said, put that aside and like focus on other people's success, have some validation through something else as well, have something else that I'm invested in. Like if I have a lousy block of training, a lousy race, it's kind of nice to be able to go and help someone else meet their goals or help someone else through their challenges, right? Like one of the things about being an athlete for as long as I have is it's not always up, right? I have ups and downs, and I'm able to empathize and help my athletes because of that.
What would you say is your coaching style?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm first off, I'm not a sport scientist. And while everything I do is certainly influenced by what the sports science is saying is best practice, I think I lean a little bit more heavily on really connecting with the athletes on a little bit more personal level, talking about what, how they can execute the plan, what can get them to the next level. And then there's a lot of things that sports science just doesn't cover. Like we were talking about this, for example, cadence drills, very little research around that. But and I know that doing low cadence work makes you feel good. It makes you feel faster. So trying to blend some of that anecdotal and scientific, and then also just focusing on, the well-being of the athlete. Like, am I building a program that works with their life? Because if I'm not, I'm failing them as a coach. It doesn't matter if it's if doing 20 hours with these workouts is the right thing to do. If they can't fit that into their life, it doesn't matter, right? It needs to fit what they're doing. It needs to make them happy. They need to have time to spend with their family, to do their regular job, to go to school, to whatever else is important to them, because we're all running on sort of a finite level of dedication that you can just commit to anything in life, and you sort of find that balance. And it's different for every athlete.
Yeah, I can see the huge benefit to your athletes if you can manage to balance it as a coach. I mean, as a teacher, one of the things I see a lot is teachers kind of learn everything that they're supposed to learn, and then they just teach forever, and they're not actually always doing things that are sharpening related skills to that, so to speak. Like actually doing this podcast makes me better in the classroom because there's related skills here that I'm able to kind of translate over. And as a coach who's in the game, who's doing it, who's providing those related skills over and over again, rather than somebody who's kind of done with that part of their career and just telling what worked for them, there's got to be a huge level of depth there that you're providing by having that simultaneous relationship. But it's got to be a difficult balance.
Sure. It's also made me realize that being a coach helps me realize as an athlete that, each athlete's a little bit different. What works for me is not going to work for all of my clients, and trying to figure that out and figure out what makes each person tick as far as motivation, but also what makes each person go fast as far as the workouts that they're doing. Like, even Curtis and I are pretty different athletes. We have, even say if our power zones, whatever they are, say something, we're different athletes. We have different strengths. And because of that, probably work that we do throughout the season is a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always interesting when coaches talk about kind of the anecdotal side of things, because it's, something that I've picked up over the last few years are, like we were talking about, lower cadence drills, or at certain points of the year, when do you put in that low cadence work, that kind of deep seated power? And with a sport like cyclocross, you see some of the most successful athletes that it's, what they do, especially in their technical or their skills training, isn't rocket science. It's very kind of anecdotal based, and very, it's something that people have been doing for the last 20, 30 years. The idea of every Wednesday you're in the woods.
And I feel like that's something that our coach Al, in a lot of ways, has brought to us. Like, I think a lot of times North Americans weren't doing that. We were trying to, I don't know if you'd say outsmart the system or what, but you go and you look at what they're doing in Belgium, like you said, and there's a certain rhythm and a cadence and a routine there, and it works. Like, there's no denying that it works. Doing those Wednesday workouts, pushing each other with other riders, there's so much benefit to that.
Mm-hmm. And something that a point that I always really appreciated, this is from Stephen Hyde. For a number of years, he kind of viewed the difference in technique or skills between North American riders generally versus the European riders generally is that it's an arms race. And for a while we were losing that arms race. And a big part of that is having other like-minded people to put ourselves around and to train with on a consistent basis. And we've just for this training camp alone, we've been able to have some sharp training sessions or technical sessions. We've been training along the Rio Grande River. There's a number of like the Bosque Trails, the single track here. There's some sandy flowing single track. We've been able to create some cool cross circuits or incorporate our intervals into that, and just being able to be responsive to the wheel in front of you is huge. And there are a number of times when I hear Mike dab a foot behind me and I know to punch it. Or we've been doing certain drills where we try to minimize the braking and maximize the speed through certain sections and kind of alter our line choice and trying to scrub speed in unique ways just to be able to be as proficient technically as you can. And you really do push your limits that way. A few years ago, I did a technical session with the Paul's Bingo team, and just being able to pick up on a couple of their drills or how they were riding or how they approached a session like that was just really, it was special to learn as an athlete. But just there were a number of takeaways from that.
And going back sort of to the question of science-based coaching is you'll never see that on a power meter or heart rate monitor. You'll never see it. And it's really, really, really important.
If you were to look at a power file from a cross race, generally it's not going to be that impressive.
No. And it's actually not that informative either. You can see how many spikes you did above threshold, see how many spikes you did above, anaerobic spikes you did, but it's not actually going to tell you the whole story. It'll probably tell you if the course is heavy. It might tell you if there was lots of running in it.
Right. Like if you did a course like Dendermonde versus a course like Zolder, two completely different power profiles, completely different courses, completely different conditions. You'll see different spikes in the heart rate, different spikes in the power. And it just, I've always thought that heart rate is a better metric for cross racing. With how responsive you are on the heart rate. You can see if you're fatigued coming into the day. If your typical average for a race is 175 beats a minute for the 60 minutes and you're down 5-6 beats, something's up. You may be fatigued. You may be on the verge of getting sick. You may need to pump the brakes a little bit. All those things, that there are all these little contributing factors that heart rate can pick up that I don't think power necessarily can in a cross race. It's a great metric for training, of course. That's what we've been using this entire time. But generally speaking, in a race situation, I've always found heart rate to be a better metric.
And we've actually spent some time during our training rides talking about getting the feel right on things like intervals. Like, yes, power is a useful metric. It can help you pace everything, but there's something to be said for turning off that screen, not looking at it, and knowing this is what this interval needs to feel like, and I'm going to go do that. And I've found more often than not, as an athlete, when you do that, you end up doing the right effort anyways. You end up in the right power zone, but it's just a little bit of a different art being able to go by feel and really train that. Because can you imagine looking down at your power meter in a cross race? Like, what would it do for you? Nothing. You need to know
you're going to hit the next stake.
Like. Yeah, exactly.
Well, so a good example, I think, is we had like 30 seconds on, 90 seconds off is a very common interval. And you do a 10-minute block of this. So instead of holding ourselves to that exact number, we thought as though there would be more of a benefit if we created a rough, like a course based on distance that was roughly 30 seconds. So we created a course that we started with a quick run up, 5-6 second run up, remount quickly, and then roughly 30 seconds all out with the power. I think the first couple pieces, the distance that we had mapped out, it was about 36, 37 seconds. But as we as athletes know our body, we know at what point we need to continue to up the pace bit by bit by bit. And the pieces got faster and we were able to go harder. And that's just from us knowing our bodies, but also pacing that effort. And we were able to produce some of the strongest pieces in the last one or two sets of that. And that's ultimately what you want to do in interval training, is you want to have this ascension of intensity. You don't want to have your hardest piece be in the middle or towards the beginning, because then you start to lose the benefit of it. So that was just kind of that creativity of, yeah, you have a basic interval of 30 by 90 for 10 minutes, 30 seconds on, 90 seconds off for 10 minutes straight. But creating a cyclocross loop where you have some skills thrown in, you have a quick run up, you need to be on it with the remount, hold the wheel in front of you. Mike and I were trading off where I was following him or he was following me, or one of us would open up a gap on each other and then you'd have to close that gap. Like, there's all these little dynamics that you have no time to even look at the power meter.
And yeah, by the
but
end
it's
of those,
beneficial. It's just as beneficial, if not more.
by those last 2-3 intervals, it's ratcheted up. It feels like you're in the last minute of a race,
Mhm.
right? And that's super valuable too. It's these 3-4 extra opportunities to go, okay, if there's this run up here, this is what I need to do. This is a race winning type effort, and just getting used to that. And even like one of the takeaways for me from that is like, okay, I wasn't super sharp on some of my remounts. Like, that's something you'd never pick up on in practice. But now that I've seen that, I can go, okay, this is something I can focus on in future training sessions to make sure that that's result from when we do get to those race winning efforts, and it really matters.
So, but that's another thing though. In the training session, you're able to train those race-like instincts. And if you were alone, doing that piece alone, even on the same circuit, do you think you would have had a cleaner remount?
Absolutely, because you're cutting yourself some slack. You're not pushing that extra 5%.
You're not under pressure.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we were trying to go for, is kind of that maybe you didn't see the direct correlation physiologically, but kind of mentally and kind of how you approach that piece and kind of that sense of urgency. That's what we were trying to get. So we did a number of these 10-minute blocks where it was just 30 seconds on, 90 seconds off. And it wasn't exactly that, but we created a cross loop that was sort of had that in mind. And we had some technical single track in between the intervals. And it just, a session like that kept us sharp, I think.
That's really interesting. Yeah. That you keep making the case that you need to train with more people. I mean, every time we talk about these things, everything comes back to that.
And it was fun. I wasn't we were counting them down, obviously, but sometimes when you do that workout by yourself, it's like, oh my goodness, I have 4 more,
You're dogging
3
it.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're exactly. You're pacing it. You're like, well, if I go a little easier on intervals 2 and 3, it'll be fine.
Right. Yeah. But just having that, again, that accountability of another training partner to kind of push you through that, and kind of whether you're giving encouragement or kind of antagonizing a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it's all of that helps at the end.
And yeah, as much as we've been good training partners and haven't let ego get in the way, like we're still competitive. Like, you don't get to this level of sport without being competitive.
Like we were actively trying to drop each other through those sets.
Yeah.
Or what, in the sprints we were doing on the road yesterday, racing to a sign, it was a race.
Yeah. Curtis is a much better sprinter than I am, for the record. But it's great. It's like keeping those, if you can silo those really competitive bits and not let it creep into every single minute of every single, of time that you're on the bike, it can be super, super beneficial. And I think we're both feeling that. Like, I'm feeling fired up to race Fayetteville, and like I've prepared the best I ever have for World Championships.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you're kind of on the same page there.
Yeah. And a good part of that also is like we did a block that was measured, it was calculated. We held each other to a good standard, and we weren't doing these massive rides where, yeah, the weather's good and it's better than where we are at home, but we're not doing these massive sessions. We're not looking to save a season. Everything is calculated and measured. And I think some of the longer rides that we did here was 3.5 hours. We don't need these massive endurance rides during this block. It's more about that focus and kind of that calculated effort to kind of sharpen the sword, because we're coming off of an already intense season. We went over to Europe, had some really high level racing. We still have that race instinct, that technique with us. It's just kind of like sharpening the sword and coming in as fresh and sharp as we can.
Yeah, we'll be at like 17 hours for the week or something like that. Like nothing crazy at all, but just tons of high quality work.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Quality over quantity.
An interesting contrast I saw a little on Kerry's Instagram. He seems to be logging some really big, long days, like bike packing or out on gravel. which is sort of the opposite philosophy. Any thoughts on
The
how that
gravel
works?
philosophy.
Yeah,
I mean,
is
those rides he did look really, really fun. Like I'll put
Oh,
out there,
yeah.
I would
Yeah.
love to do that riding at some point in time.
It looked really fun.
like an
I was just
amazing trip.
surprised to see him doing it at this point in the season. And maybe he's thinking further down the road about his gravel part of his season, and that's sort of, maybe he's got kind of a different goal orientation there a little bit. But if that was specifically for Worlds, like that's a very drastically different approach.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I mean, I can't really speak to what other people are doing, but you know, a world championships coming to my home country is something that I've been looking forward to for years. It's something that I've been trying to bring my best to for years. So yeah, I guess it's all we can do is kind of focusing on what we're doing and trusting that what we're doing is right. And, you know, I'm at peace with the preparation that I've had, and I'm very content with it. And I think that we've been able to control our environment and put out really high quality work. So at this point, it's just kind of trusting what we've done and kind of blocking out what other athletes are doing at this point, you know, whether, you know, right, wrong, or otherwise what they're doing. Yeah, it seems fun, but you know, for something that has been a goal of mine for so long, I think this is the point where I need the most focus. So I'm for this block that we've been able to do the last couple of weeks, I'm very happy with it.
I kind of wondered the same about Tom Pidcock. I don't know what they do in their team camp, but how that, you know, how he balances that as well, whether he has a different training program than other guys at that point a little bit in prioritizing
he
him winning that, or whether he's doing the same thing the other guys are doing, or, you know,
like when you're on a team like Ineos, like you're looking forward pretty far. I mean, they're looking at the Ardennes Classics, some of the bigger races later in the year. I'm sure he's looking to be a bit more competitive in the Grand Tours. Like, I heard that, you know, in the commentary of, was it Hama was yesterday?
Yep.
Yeah. He did a 33-hour week,
but
that's massive. But it's, I mean, again, also he's doing high quality work and he has the resources to recover, and he's, you know, at that World Tour level. So it's, I mean, it's pretty clear that they have bigger goals further down the road. But again, like you could kind of see, like he had like the diesel, but not quite that explosivity that, I mean, he had a good race yesterday. He crashed in the last lap in Hama, and he had a strong race again today. But again, he didn't quite have that explosivity, kind of that snap that you saw like Ely or Lars have.
Ely rode away from him on that sort of final climb today, and you have to wonder if, you know, Pidcock could have held that a month ago. And now he might come around. He might be really, really strong for Fayetteville. Actually, I think he will be really strong for Fayetteville.
I think he absolutely will, because it's after that training block, he had two really high-end explosive efforts. It's just sharpening the sword at this point. And I think, you know, he's going to be good for next weekend, but that's also kind of the contrast of, you know, at what point in the year and what are your goals? How are you looking to structure the periodization of your training?
And he's the outlier. You look at the other Belgian pros who are coming over for Worlds, and they aren't doing that 33-hour week. They're doing,
well, their training camps were a few weeks ago, or whether it was in December that they were down in Spain. Ely or a number of those guys like going down to Calpe in Spain and doing that, and they can do a quick direct flight, whether it be from Brussels or Charleroi, direct down to Calpe, do a quick, you know, 5-day camp, whether it's 5 days of endurance, come back up to Belgium, do a couple of races, go back down. Sven was, I believe he had an apartment down in Mallorca that he would always fly direct down to. And he had his own setup. He had a bike down there. So he literally just packed a carry-on with his clothes, and he'd already have his stuff down there. He had his apartment. He had his bike already down there, his full setup. And he would go down a number of times through the season just to be able to, when it's cold and rainy in Belgium, you fly down to Mallorca, Spain, and you get really high quality work on familiar roads. And I think it's Mallorca or Calpe, or we always went to Malaga, Spain during that, you know, through January, and we were able to come back for the final couple World Cups, sharpen up before the World Championships. And that was a block that always worked well. But kind of thinking back on a couple training camps that we did in Malaga, like we were trying to push bigger volume. And I think the contrast that I see from those camps to this is like, maybe I was able to train more endurance through the course of the season this year. And I was able to hold good form through the December block. I don't need to do this big endurance block in January to prepare for Worlds. It's more about just kind of sharpening the sword. Yeah, we're getting in some endurance days and kind of having that good balance. But again, we're doing 16 to 18 hours in the week, mixing the intensity with the endurance.
Well, I think the question you can ask yourself, like we're done our cross season at Worlds. Some athletes will continue on. Some have bigger goals for the road racing calendar. But I was thinking, it's like, well, what if I'm pushing endurance right now? Is that actually helping my World Championships prep? And the answer is no. Like, you need to keep the system rolling, and you need to keep some training stress on it. But the actual benefits of doing big endurance blocks kind of peter out. Like, those have to be wrapped up probably 14 days before a big event if you're going to get any benefit from it. Maybe 10 days. But we're in the final week now. It's just keeping systems active, keeping sharp, making sure that you feel good. I think both Curtis and I feel better if we carry a little bit of load into a race, but not so much that you're really tired.
Exactly. Yeah. So
what does that look like this week then? It's for people listening, I think we mentioned it, but it's Sunday. So we're 1 week out, right? And you guys have a little travel in front of you as well. So what do you do over the next 7 days here?
Yeah, so today is going to be our first day of recovery, kind of making sure that we're going into the travel fresh. We don't want to be too loaded when we're traveling. A couple of days of rest to kind of come off this block. But again, it wasn't that intense or loaded of a block where we're doing these massive hours. It's something that I think we're going to be able to recover from very easily. For me, Wednesday and Thursday, there's going to be a bit more depth coming into the race on Sunday. So there's that team relay event. Mike, are you doing the team relay?
Yep. I'll be doing the team relay, which is actually I'm really excited about it, but it is an interesting complication because typically we open up for our races on the day before. This is 2 days before my race. I'm not worried about it necessarily, but it does change sort of the normal week structure a little bit. My plan is still to do, I think, a course day on Thursday and do a ride on Wednesday with just some sharpness in there. Like an easier endurance ride with some punches. But instead of opening up on the Saturday, I'm going to sort of treat that team relay like my opportunity to get a really fast lap on course and take Saturday a little bit easier than I normally would. Stay away from the venue, which honestly, because there's 3 races going on, can be kind of nice.
And there's a lot of energy going around it with the fans, the spectators, the media. There's all these extra hoops you kind of have to jump through. If you can get a lot of that pre-ride done earlier in the week and just save that for race day, I think that's probably better just to conserve the energy.
As a younger rider, like you've done lots of Worlds, I've done lots of World Championships. As a younger rider, I made the mistake a few times of getting too amped up for Worlds because you're there on like the Tuesday and you can pre-ride the course usually from Wednesday or Thursday onwards. You start feeling like you need to dial in every single line perfectly, and you spend way too long on course. When the reality is you need to treat it like most other race weekends, like every other race weekend that you've done and had success at throughout the entire season. You don't need to do 50 laps on course to feel good on it. A lot of times, especially for a course that we know that we've raced on before, it doesn't take that much. So the mistake I used to make was, trying to dial it in and showing up to the race with too much course time, being too tired. So now I sort of look at the venue as like spend as little as time there as possible and get out, go back to the hotel, do your training rides, but it's like stay away from that because like you were saying, the energy, the excitement, it's contagious and that's awesome, but it can kind of lead to a bit of a, it's a bit of a pitfall as well.
Well, like, I mean, when you think about a lot of this kind of, the banners, kind of that excitement, the music, like everything that's going on at the race it's not for you, the racer. It's for the spectators. It's the show that's going on. You're not gaining 30 extra watts because you did a few extra laps or you're in that environment. I think it's up to you to kind of have a little bit, you need to continue to control your environment to stay calm and know that you're not going to be gaining power because of this environment, that excitement that can, in a way, you need to shut it out. It's a World Championships on home soil for me. And it's like, I guess it's home soil for you as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
in the greater American.
You're an American
landscape.
As well, right? We're all Americans here.
Yeah. You're an American. I'm an American.
Oh, see, that's the
Big
accent
difference.
right there. But it's still like there's that excitement, and I know the Canadian athletes are taking a lot of pride in this as well because it is that North American soil. This is our scene. And we take a lot of pride in preparing for this and having our friends and family and our sponsors there. And it's a huge event, and kind of having our own team structures and in a familiar environment there. But again, you have to know when to unplug from it. I know that my first World Championships was in Koksijde, Belgium. I think it was 2012 was Koksijde.
Year before Louisville.
Yeah, it was the year before Louisville.
Yeah,
I was a first year junior. And for those who know Koksijde, it's one of the most iconic and most difficult courses that you'll do, like the most physically demanding, because it's so sandy. It's so heavy with the sand. And I came into that week, I spent way too much time on the course.
You're like, I'm going to learn how to ride sand in the week leading into Worlds.
And it would have been far more beneficial to do 1 or 2 laps and be like, okay, this is very difficult. The ruts are going to continue to change and evolve, and the conditions are it's going to be very difficult. So instead of wasting the energy and kind of zapping all the watts by just doing these laps of this really heavy course, I would have rather have done a couple high quality laps, try some sections at speed, test out tire pressure, ask as many questions as I can from my peers and from people who know more than me, and then just be able to unplug quickly, as quick as I can, and just kind of go back to my environment and to rest and bring my best into that event. But I don't think, that being my first World Championships, there was that excitement, and that was a mistake that I had made and that I've tried to learn over the last few years. That was almost 10 years ago. But it's just kind of having that confidence in what you're doing and to know when to unplug.
So tell me a little bit about the team relay. This is a new thing. Who you guys racing with, and how do you anticipate that playing into getting ready for Sunday, or that event as an isolated event?
Yeah, so basically the team relay has 6 laps, and now there's 6 World Championship categories, so equal on the men's and the women's, junior, U23, and elite. And it's one rider from each category doing 1 lap. And it's just kind of exciting, a little bit selfishly as a Canadian male. I think we have some really fast juniors. We have Magali, obviously, and I think, I'm not exactly sure who's going to be representing us, but like we've had Ava and Isabella Holmgren ripping it up in the junior women's field. We have had Ian Ackert ripping it up, and Luke Valenti being, having great rides as junior men. Like, I think Canada could actually do well at this. I was joking. I was like, I'm holding up the train here. These kids are getting top 5s at World Cups, and I'm not doing that. But pair that with Meg. So
you're going to be leading them out. That's going to be the case. But we were kind of talking about this before we got on the podcast, but over the course period in Belgium and the Netherlands, like just the number of both American and Canadian juniors on both the men's and women's side performing at a high level and getting podiums or on the top step through a number of these races, that was so cool to see. And I don't think that's something that you've really seen
since you and Logan.
It's
been a while.
Yeah. So it's what year was that? That was 2000. That was in the 2012-2013 season going into Louisville. I was a last year junior. Logan Owen and I were 2nd and 3rd respectively behind a very young Mathieu van der Poel at the Azencross in Lowenhout. And that was one of the coolest races I did at that point in my career. But I don't think that for the American side, at least, we haven't had that kind of success in a while. We've had a few stars come up and get some really, high quality results. But this year it seemed like there were more young boys and girls coming in the junior category on both the Canadian and American side that were they're able to get these podiums or compete at a higher level.
And pretty consistently throughout the block. For a lot of these riders, I think this was their first time in Europe. So I was impressed. Just, they were able to show up and compete and not be intimidated by the courses. And I think that speaks to, I think they all come from different programs in different areas, but that speaks to how different programs have been able to just like prepare their riders for these more challenging courses, because we don't see anything like Namur or Ball in, the domestic racing in North America. There's nothing even close to that. So if you're going to prepare for that, it needs to be like, I know a lot of the Canadians come from this hardwood club, and the coach there is really on them about, Rob Holmgren is really on about like, we're going to ride hard stuff on our cross bikes, and it's going to be harder than anything you're going to see in these domestic races. But they all really excelled in Europe, so it worked.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to critique the development process when things aren't working out. But I think when things start to work, like a number of these young juniors that are starting to get on the podium, it's important to highlight the people that are putting in the hard work in that development pipeline process. Whether it's, with USA Cycling or Cycling Canada, or people privately coaching or leading these development camps. Over the summer, we had Jeff Proctor on, who has his Eurocross Academy, who parallel, I guess, to USA Cycling, was able to bring over a number of young athletes to Belgium, and were able to provide that structure for young athletes to compete. They had a place to stay, they had the mechanics, they had the routines, they had the vehicles, and that infrastructure to know where to train on weekdays. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches or mentors are able to kind of nail in back here at home, which is in training, try to ride stuff that scares you at times. Know when to take risks that are, know when to take necessary risks. But if it's raining, put the mid-range tires on or the file treads and practice sliding around or making ruts, or try riding in the sand, because that's a really challenging condition. And maybe you don't often see that in US cross. That's a condition that makes you better. If you're continuously preparing for the highest level of cyclocross, which is in Europe, you're going to succeed here in North America. So just seeing a number of, with the US athletes, Catherine Sarkisov, Jack Springer, Frank O'Reilly, AJ August. I'm sure I'm missing a couple in there, but those are the names that come to mind. And then as well as the Canadian athletes that were performing well, like it's really cool to see. So my hope is that it translates well into good performances across all categories for us in Fayetteville. But I think that speaks to, development does work, to keep plugging away at it. Huge thanks to the folks that are behind the scenes actually putting in that work and have been putting in the work for years, because just because you put in the work for a year, it doesn't mean you see the results immediately.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully these riders can continue through the elite categories. Like, I don't know, sometimes I think, and I look at my career, and I would love nothing more to be the Ian Field to their Tom Pidcock, like Ian was racing as the British guy for years and years, and like racing solidly. And he was the guy. And now 10 years later, and there's this group of awesome British athletes who are, there's like 4 of them in the top 20 on any given World Cup at least. And Pidcock obviously there for the win. So it's just, I hope that in 10 years we look and see some of these names like winning World Cups. I'd be pumped about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Time will tell.
Very cool. Very cool. So I guess the only other thing I really wondered was, cyclocross ends for you guys, the World Championships. There's a couple after that. I know Curtis prefers that it would go well into February. But
into August.
August.
I mean, like, we race in any condition. Why not do it year round?
It's called gravel, actually. It's 10 times as long, though.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's just being worse at cross for 10 times as long.
Minus the skills.
Yeah, I like that.
But no, we were talking about like having some races like, early March or late February, like in snow, whether like on the side of a ski hill. But in all seriousness, the European season does go for another 3 weeks. And I think that, coming off a block like this in Albuquerque, I think we'd be able to perform consistently and at a high level to continue that form for a few more weeks if we did do that. I just kind of having that mental, or like that mindset of Worlds isn't the end all be all. It's nice to have, a few races after that to know that, it's less pressure almost.
For sure. You've done post-Worlds races. I've done post-Worlds races. I've done it a few times where I think whether you want to do it is very dependent on how mentally fatigued and cracked you are. I feel pretty fresh right now, and I'm like very excited to race and would love to keep that rolling. This
is also a different scenario than we've had in almost any other previous season, where we've come back to the US relatively early in January and been able to stay here on home soil and kind of be in our home routines, or just kind of being a part of a familiar culture in a familiar environment. And then we're racing World Championships in the US, obviously, but being able to go back fresh and recharged, I think it's a little bit, it's the challenge that I think a lot of athletes have had to deal with is spending 2 months in Europe before the World Championships and trying to muster up that motivation to continue to go back. And it does take special environment and a very special perspective to continue that on. And it takes a lot of dedication. It's kind of controlling your environment, being around the right people, and being in the right location, knowing to go down to Spain, whether it's a familiar environment, whether Sven had Malaga, a lot of these athletes, Wout likes to go to Calpe as well. We've seen Ely and Michael Van Toren out going down to Calpe pretty regularly. And just having that familiar environment to go to and having a good training partner, someone to kind of, again, we said this at the beginning, hold you accountable, keep you honest with the sessions, and kind of know when to kind of pull back. Because if you're alone, it's kind of very easy to say, I'm feeling very good today, woke up in the green with the Whoop, woke up with a 95% sleep score, intervals felt good, I'm going to do a few more extra hours. But just having that extra athlete to kind of bounce ideas off of, or just say, nope, we're gonna pull the plug, even though we're feeling good today. We got to keep the big picture in mind. All that's very important. So I think I'd love to be able to do that block in the next couple of years, because those races are kind of unique. Like, I don't know, Mike, did you find that there was less stress, or kind of, it's a unique environment around those races?
For sure, especially rolling in that midweek race. Moldegum is always,
it's unique.
It's like a park cross. It's just casual. Everyone just raced Worlds. I don't know.
It's kind of like showing off the jerseys, and
yeah.
But so I believe that there's no race on Wednesday this after the World Championships, and they moved it to the weekend. So there's still 6 races for.
And there's some killer courses. Like that Lille course is fantastic. There's also some pedally bogs in there, but
Lille is fun. I did really enjoy that. There are a number of really fun courses, and there's always this unique twist to them. But
cool.
Yeah, Hulst used to be.
Yeah, Hulst was a post.
That was a very difficult one to do when you weren't fresh.
Yes, I think this year actually, I think Asper Havre is a post Worlds race, which is
that's heavy.
Yeah,
you're gonna need a big 30-hour training week to be ready for that one.
That's also sometimes those heavy ones after Worlds, though. You can get pretty good results because some people are just checked out. They're like, it's hard.
Well, it's a long season. Yeah, but I mean, just to kind of know that you have the form and the depth to continue on with that'll be fun. But maybe that's something we coordinate. If we can have a good North American contingent doing those next year or the next couple of years, that would be great.
And the key to be successful in those, I think, is making sure that Belgium feels like home. I think a lot of North Americans sort of crack themselves on having Belgium just be somewhat different the entire time they're there. And you can only deal with that for so long, right? You want to
if you create an environment for yourself and you keep saying, oh, this place is rainy, it's gray, and it's gloomy all the time, you're going to start to believe it. And it's just that negativity is contagious if you're around other athletes. So kind of having that positive environment, being around the right people, kind of creating the right team. And that's something that I feel like I've been very fortunate with my team and our setup that we've had. But again, it's just kind of always being mindful of that, because I think for a number of years, that's always been the biggest fear of how Belgium is going to crack you. But it's all about the perspective that you bring over and the preparation that you bring over. If you come over with not a lot of depth and you haven't done the skills work and you're not in the right environment, you're going to struggle. But if you do your homework and you put together the pieces of the puzzle, I think the one athlete I thought that really figured it out, that didn't live over there full time, John Page lived over there full time, but the one athlete I thought that figured it out of the Americans that were going back and again from America to Belgium was Stephen Hyde. He was always able to create a very good environment. He was very social with a number of those athletes. And there are those pictures of him on training camp with Wout. Like that, just being invited to a training camp, let alone like a couple skill sessions with those guys, is pretty huge.
Yeah, and he was always excited to go. And that's a big, not just excited to go do the races, but like excited to go be in Belgium. And that matters. If you're excited to if you go there with the attitude like, oh, there's all these different roads and they're fun to ride. There's this great sand training places I can go train. That makes a big difference. If you're just going there for the races and look at everything else as kind of a drag, it's pretty hard to race well.
To be successful, you need to place yourself around other like-minded, successful or more successful people than you. And I think that's that's an opportunity. That's a very unique opportunity that you get when you go over there. And I think if you isolate yourself, it's not a good thing. You need to continue to immerse yourself in that culture. Now, I think the effort that a lot of North Americans have made over the last couple of years to go over there with, dealing with COVID and the restrictions and all these different, it's just, there are a lot of complications over the last couple of years. I think just everything that we've said, keeping that in mind, all the more props to the athletes that are going over there and making that effort, because things are a bit more shut down. You're not able to necessarily go to your favorite restaurants and coffee shops all the time, but you're able to, one thing that I found is that I'm able to be a little bit more open to exploring more on those roads and those trails and kind of finding more unique training grounds and kind of immersing myself a little bit more in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that that so many people ride bikes in the Netherlands and Belgium, and it's because
that's the
it's
culture
pretty fun.
part.
Yeah,
it's the cultural part. I mean, but yeah.
All right. World Championships, man. A couple days away.
Yeah. It's exciting. While we're recording this on Sunday, we're 1 week away. Mike, you're doing the team relay. I will not be doing the team relay. So it's going to be a little bit more, I'll get my course time in Wednesday, Thursday, open up Saturday. And I'm really excited to compete on home soil. I guess it's an opportunity. We're dealing with, of course, we brought up the complications with COVID and kind of everything's been bouncing back, and there are some concerns there. But ultimately, what I'm most excited about is to showcase U.S. cyclocross, kind of what our scene is like, show it on a world stage, and it's an opportunity to show all the work that I've put in. This is a goal that I've been looking forward to for a number of years, and an opportunity for U.S. cyclocross and North American cyclocross really to just kind of put its best foot forward. So it's going to be exciting. Over the next couple of days, look out for a video that Mike and I have done. Our buddy Chris Norvald is editing, just like a brief day in the life of what we've been able to do here in Albuquerque with the training, what the riding is like, what our routines are like. And it's been a very special opportunity to kind of get together and live for sport, create a very productive environment for the both of us. And, we can go in to the World Championships knowing that we did all the right preparation that we could.
Yeah. And, that matters. Like, bike racing is bike racing. Anything could happen, but showing up the line, knowing that you did everything you could is, in some ways, that's a victory by itself.
It's just having that peace of mind.
Yeah.
So.
Can't wait.
All right. Tony, do you have anything else from over there?
No, man. I'm ready for next week already.
All right.
Good. Well, thanks for having me.
All right, Mike, thanks for coming on. This is it was great to sit down and chat. And I mean, it's for the last couple of weeks, we've been having a lot of these chats, whether it be on the bike or kind of sitting on the couch watching Michael Jordan or Drive to Survive or just, cooking dinners. But it's, it's good to sit down on the podcast and kind of share this with everyone. So Mike, thanks for coming on. Tony, thank you for all your work behind the scenes editing and for coming on. And everyone, thank you for listening. If you haven't done so yet, just a quick reminder, please like, share, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. That helps us get the word out and help really promote the sport that we love. I love talking about cyclocross, and I love talking about cyclocross with other passionate people. So if we can get more people involved or more people stoked for the World Championships this weekend, then that's fine by us. So thanks for listening. Take care, stay healthy, keep riding, and we'll catch you all after the World Championships in Fayetteville. Take care.